Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to tell if a fearful avoidant is turning into a securely attached individual. So I'm going to go into like a little bit, here's the structure of the video that you'll see. I'm going to go into like a mini rant first about how we can change our attachment style. It's so important that we're not getting misinformation or maybe like limited information because we're only getting a piece of the puzzle. Is everybody able to change their attachment style? Yes, if they're all able to put in the work and get access to the proper tools and resources. How do I know this? Because I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of people at this point actually go through that process from one-on-one sessions, workshops, and now inside of the school. But number two, like just from like a really scientific standpoint, you didn't come into the world with your attachment style. This developed through patterns that were wired into your subconscious over time through repetition, through emotional imprinting. And we have neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, and we have tools to reprogram our subconscious mind. And all of these things are crucial indicators of the fact that like we can change our brain and our brain structure and our patterns and our behavioral patterns and all these different things. But one of the key elements, and this is where you're sort of getting missing information sometimes, is that it's very hard to change your attachment style if you're not targeting the subconscious level. If we don't work to create change and engage the subconscious in the process and use specific reprogramming tools and emotional imprinting techniques and these sorts of things, then it's next to impossible to create change because the subconscious mind will always overpower the conscious mind. The subconscious mind is like 95 to 97% of all of our decisions and actions and feelings and behaviors and patterns, and our conscious mind is roughly 3 to 5%. And so the conscious mind can sort of hack the subconscious mind, and it can use tools and do these different things to create new programs and paradigms. And so there's an entry point to change, but we can't outwill or overpower the subconscious mind for very long. We can do it for little spurts sometimes, but it doesn't last long. And that's why you guys see, like, you might try to will yourself into changing a pattern, or I've heard a lot of people who want to will themselves to stop getting angry or will themselves to stop eating junk food or all these different things, and you keep feeling like you hit this roadblock. That roadblock is actually subconscious programs that are working in a different direction. So I know there's a lot of information, like if you have fearful avoidant attachment style, or if you're disorganized attachment style, or anxious avoidant, they're all the same thing, just so you guys know. If you have this attachment style, you can't change. And I can tell you very conclusively that that's not true. It's absolutely possible to change as long as you target the subconscious mind in the process. And from a very personal perspective, I was a very fearful avoidant attachment style myself, and I'm a very secure person at this point in my journey. So just to put this out here, I hope that everybody knows that these things are changeable, and that you just have to get your hands on the right resources. So in this video, that was my rant. Hopefully it's not a rant. It's trying to be like, it's just something I really want you guys to know and understand, because I think it's so disempowering to see people be like, oh, I read the book Attached, and then, I was told that the book can't even talk to me in this book because it just says, oh, go see a therapist immediately. Good luck. I think that's a beautiful book, and I think there's so many wonderful things about that book. I've never actually quite read the whole book, but I've read a good portion of it, and it was excellent and very well written, but it's targeting the conscious mind. So it gives you amazing awareness, but it's not giving you tools to change. And I want you to know that that's not the whole piece of the pie. So what we're going to go through in this video specifically is we're going to talk a little bit about some key signs along the way if you're sort of doing some of this deeper work, and especially if you're a member inside of the school, and how to sort of check in and see, like, am I becoming more secure, and what are these key points? And these are things that if you're just beginning your journey to try to become more secure as a fearful avoidant, this is also a great way of being like, okay, these are things I have to work on in order to become secure. These are sort of stepping stones in my journey of healing that I can use and become aware of and knowledgeable about. So before I dive into exactly those pieces and those key points, I also want to remind you guys I'm doing as much as I can right now to support our community. I'm trying to do a daily video as much as I can, and we're offering scholarships to our community members. We are also offering 25% discounts. The coupon code is with you. It's all one word, and that's for all of our membership bundles. So for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and also single course purchases are discounted by 25%. So we're just extending as much as we can right now to you guys and to our community especially for those of you who are feeling maybe a little bit isolated and stuck at home. And, this is a beautiful time to actually work on yourself and try to learn and grow and experience as many positive things as you can, so you can walk away from this kind of crazy time that's happening in the world and be like, oh, I learned a whole lot. Like, I worked on my attachment style, became more secure. I showed up for myself in different ways. Like, this is a beautiful time to at least take something beautiful away from some of the chaos that's happening. Reminds me, there's a really beautiful quote in the Tao, and it talks about how there's order and chaos. Anyways, that's just a side note, but I really like that quote. So let's talk about how to actually tell if you're becoming more secure. So first and foremost, one of the first things that you'll see that's basically a necessity in order to become more secure as a fearful avoidant is to actually work on questioning all the meaning you give to the things that you notice with your hypervigilance. So hypervigilance is basically a trauma adaptation a lot of the time, where you learn, like what the fearful avoidant learns in childhood is they don't have an attachment strategy. Anxious learn to soothe through their caregivers, but get really anxious when that caregiver is gone because they're not really self-soothing. Dismissive avoidants learn, at least repetitively, that, hey, you can't soothe through your caregiver, so they learn to soothe themselves. And at least there's some stability there, like some certainty or knowing what to do. Versus fearful avoidance, sometimes the caregiver's there and available and emotionally present, and other times the caregiver is depressed or addicted or in a state of chaos or fighting or anger, or these different sort of things that can take place in the household. And there's no predictable pattern around it. And this is where, like, at least the anxious knows, okay, they come and they go, and when they're here physically, I tend to feel quite safe. When they're not, okay, I feel a lot less safe. The dismissive avoidant knows, okay, when my caregiver is here or not there, it doesn't matter. There's a consistency behind them not being available emotionally. And so they learn to really break into their own space of self-soothing. So it becomes this really big piece here where it's like, once the fearful avoidant just sees so much inconsistency all the time, the only thing they find safety in is their adaptation to become hypervigilant and be able to read micro-expression, body language, changes in pattern, changes in tone of voice, and become so adept at doing this that sort of creates some kind of consistency or predictability, which then allows them to adapt their behavior accordingly. Like, oh, I should go close to my caregiver, I should stay away, these sorts of things. So the hypervigilance becomes this huge part of the fearful avoidance, basically, personality. And so does the distrust, because there's no trusted consistency. And one of the major factors that trust is based on is congruency. Like, what you see and what you say line up, or there's consistency in behavioral patterns that are easy to predict and feel safe around. And so these are part of the core reasons why you have so many hypervigilance sort of adaptations, or so many patterns of hypervigilance within yourself, and also why there can be so many trust wounds at a deep subconscious level. So, and sometimes, by the way, like the trust wounds, you may not even realize that you have them. Like, sometimes they're kind of hidden away for a lot of fearful avoidance, and so that's important to notice as well. Sometimes it's that you don't trust anybody to take care of you or look out for you, or to feel interdependent with people, because that requires kind of being somewhat dependent and also independent. And so these things can be where the trust wounds sort of pop up more. So one of the first things that's required and necessary, and also when you start seeing this, it's like a signpost of the fearful avoidant becoming more secure, is they start questioning the meaning they give to their hypervigilance itself. So let's say, for example, you see a change in your partner's mood. Instead of being like, something's going wrong, this is about to turn into a fight, they're mad at me for something, they're angry at me, they're cheating, they're pulling away from the relationship, instead of giving it painful meaning, at the beginning, your mind's naturally going to do that, and it's going to jump to worst case scenarios a lot of the time and the meaning you give to situations. But as you start healing, you'll notice that you're able to notice that you're giving that meaning, and then question it, and not invest in this narrative of something that's happening that you can't know for certain. And it's the changing of those stories that becomes a huge first point of regulating that hypervigilance, essentially. And that allows for a tremendous amount more of self-soothing than there was. Because think of like the hypervigilance and the meaning that accompanies it as like the opposite of self-soothing. It's like self-tormenting. And notice that while you're really great at noticing the difference in patterns and changes in patterns, it doesn't mean that you're masterful at being really clear about your stories and the meaning you're giving to things, and if those things are always true. And sometimes people will be like, well, fearful avoidants are so intuitive. Yes. And maybe you're noticing overall patterns or themes, but you're not always hitting everything right on the money with like what exactly the story is that you're telling yourself. Maybe the person is a little bit in a bad mood, and maybe it does have something to do with you, but maybe that doesn't mean that the person's about to leave the relationship or cheat. Maybe there's just a pain point in the relationship that needs to be discussed or addressed. So you're usually good with that first little bit of noticing a pattern, but then often you pile up meaning on top of that. And it's important to recognize, and that is the first requirement on the path to becoming more secure, is to be able to change that and actually communicate about it instead. And so this brings us to the next point, which is that fearful avoidants begin to speak up about their feelings and needs. And this added layer of vulnerability is extremely important. So what we'll see now is that fearful avoidants start going, hey, I noticed that like there's a shift in what's going on, and is there anything you want to talk about? Is everything okay? Or, hey, I really need to have an open conversation about this. It's important to me. And so there's this open layer of like being able to talk about things, and also being able to say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit afraid, and I could use some validation in the relationship to know that we're in a good place. Or I could use some reinforcement if you could communicate to me that we're, still growing together and we're on the right track, or whatever it is that you might need, right? So the key element is being able to recognize what you're feeling and what you're needing in real time, and be able to bring that into a relationship in a healthy form of communication, instead of just telling a story around something that you noticed, giving really painful meaning on top of that original story, and then deactivating as a result of what's happening, and you actually sort of triggered your own deactivating strategies to come alive. So this is very important, bringing your feelings and needs into the relationship and feeling safe to communicate about all the needs that you have. And when we communicate needs, our goal is not to like get somebody to meet them immediately. Everybody has to meet every need that we communicate. Our goal is to teach people what our needs are through communicating repetitively and seeing them through, but also through binding a need with a strategy and a clarification of what that looks like. Because people interpret what your needs are in such different ways. So one person might be like, oh, I need more connection in the relationship. And one person reads that as like physical intimacy, and the other person reads that as like deeper conversations, right? So we can have these big mismatches in how we experience what the expression of a need is. And that's why it's so important to clarify and strategize. And so the next thing that's really important in here is when you've begun to question your stories that you and the meaning you give to things, when you begin to speak up about your feelings and needs and add that layer of vulnerability and communicate the need effectively, then another huge like milestone in the fearful avoidance journey to becoming secure is that they begin to notice their boundaries in all relationships in their lives and show up for them. So it's like you start to notice like when you need to say no to something, and a no to somebody else, it might be a yes to you, right? If you are like, let's say you have a deadline and you're really busy and your friend's like, hey, I really need your help with something around my house. You might want to help. You might be like interested and happy to help a friend, but it doesn't mean that has to be right in that moment when you're stressed. And sometimes saying yes to them when like then you're going to be up working until 4 a.m. and then go to work at 7, or whatever it might be. Sometimes that yes to them is a no to you, and it's actually a form or act of self-betrayal. And so much of our trust wounds as fearful avoidance heal when you also learn to trust yourself to communicate your boundaries, communicate your needs, and show up for yourself in the relationship to you. So these are some really important milestones. There are others for sure, but these are some really crucial big steps. And these are like, each of these milestones are so pivotal for a fearful avoidant. Like they're very strong milestones. And there's other things too, like, validating somebody else's emotions, learning to empathize more effectively, like not sympathize. Fearful avoidants are so good at sympathizing and empathizing too, honestly, but they sometimes lose their ability to see, hear, understand somebody else from a true place of grounded empathy in the moments specifically when they're triggered. Because your emotions are so overwhelming that you forget to look at where might this person be coming from and what might be going on other than my story of the situation. And so That's another little place of work. And there's a few others for sure, but these are the key ones that are like the root level causes to how we've maintained that attachment style over time. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you're getting a lot of value out of these videos, and I will see you in the next video.